Welcome to another inspiring episode of Rise and Thrive Conversations for Greatness, where we delve into personal growth, motivation, inspiration, and the secrets of success. Today, we are thrilled to welcome back a remarkable guest who embodies the essence of continual personal development and effective communication. Aaron Holesgrove joins us once again to share his insights on enhancing personal development and honing communication skills. Aaron's not just a leader, but a motivator who lifts all those around into new heights. His dedication to personal growth and his ability to inspire teams with positive energy are amazing. In this episode, we'll dive deep into Aaron's latest strategies for personal development and growth and exploring how this can elevate all of our lives. Aaron, welcome back to the show.
Merko, I love you, man. It's good to see you again.
It's so good to be back together. Now, for those listeners that didn't hear you in episode 22 and 23, what have you been doing? No, but seriously, after you've heard this episode, go back and get all the gold we spoke about last time: agile mindset and communication, building empathy and relatedness, embracing servant leadership, the power of autonomy, and of course, the SCARF model as a framework for understanding and improving interactions with others. Those two shows are absolutely packed with gold. I've had some great feedback from them. And of course, I had to have you back on the show. For those that didn't or haven't heard you in episode 22 and 23, can you tell our listener a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a technical guy by trade. I used to be a software developer and a technical lead, but these days I'm a project manager. So I sort of put down the tools about a dozen years ago, I'd say now. And I'm leading software development teams. I'm also doing some consulting as an agile coach, and that's an IT thing, the agile methodologies. Just getting software developers to get stuff out the door. That's my job. That's what I do.
Even though it sounds technical, it's mainly a people person role, isn't it?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm half joking and half serious when I say in job interviews that one of my most important jobs to do is put on my pom-poms and be the ultimate cheerleader, because it makes all the difference in the world when people are happy in their job. So if they feel like they're working with someone who's genuinely wanting them to succeed, it's going to make all the difference in the world in terms of how they approach the work and how well they do it.
We can't leave an introduction for yourself without talking about your family, of course. So give us a bit of a scale, and I really mean scale, of what you're dealing with on a daily basis.
So I'm raising 8 children, 6 full-time, and I've got shared care of 2 others. So the age ranges are 16, 14, 12, 10, 9, 6, 4, and 2.
Holy moly, no wonder you're into personal development.
Six girls and 2 boys. Yeah, so
anything I could say to that will get me in a lot of trouble. But for those, I've also got a daughter and I've got a son. Don't have 6, but I've got one of each. So can relate. And you did share last time some really good things. That story about your daughter and the toast that really resonated, and it will for those that go back to episode 22 and 23. Today, what is on your mind? What goal are you thinking that we should be giving the listeners?
Yeah, well, I guess given that we spoke about the SCARF model and looking to inadvertently invoke the fight or flight response in people, it'd be fun to start talking about some tools to follow up about that. And so in these 2 episodes, I thought we could talk about permission. In part 2, we can talk about the permission model. So basically, if you're looking to get better answers to the questions that you're asking, the permission model is fantastic for that. And in this episode, in part 1, I thought we could talk about the inverse, like using permission in giving answers and talking to people in general. And these are all about conversations for greatness. You find yourself having more amazing conversations with people in general, just by introducing a little bit of permission every once in a while in your discussion. So that's what I was thinking. I think it can be really helpful for anyone listening to this podcast.
I like that. So what I'm hearing there, it kind of opens the door because everyone's happy about what you're going to talk about, or because you've been given permission to go down the road, whatever road you're about to go down. So you can have those more meaningful conversations. And as you say, conversations for greatness is a nice one for for putting that one in there. So I guess the question to ask you is, what is the best way to go about getting permission from someone? Do you want to start there, or where would you like to start?
Well, it's a very broad question. Actually, if you don't mind, I'd love to just do a 30-second timeout if that's okay.
Sure.
Notice what I did there, John. Permission.
Got permission.
It's worth pointing out just before we dive in is that a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today was taught to me by my dear, dear friend and mentor, Alan Singer. And I am so excited for your listeners that they got a chance to hear from him on this show. And I wanted to give him a shout out. I adore this guy. He's taught me so much. He was actually on my mind a lot the last time I was on this show. Like, yeah, the things that he's taught me in the past. And it's also worth bringing up, Alan, because that's sort of where I wanted to start in regards to using permission in general. Because I would encourage anyone listening to this episode, hit pause, go back in the archive and listen to John's interviews with Alan. Because not only is the subject matter that they're talking about gold, but you'll notice very subtly, but very importantly, that Alan's constantly using permission in the discussion that they're having. And it's no, it's not a surprise that they ended up having a really engaging conversation. One of the things that I'd learned is that a conversation is like a game of table tennis, right? Yeah, in table tennis, you hit the ball over the net, it goes on the other side. It spends an amount of time on that side of the table tennis table. That person hits it back to you, spends the same amount of time on that side of the table tennis table, and then you hit it back again. The ball is spending an equal amount of time on either side of the table. In a perfect world, a conversation is like that too. Yeah, you might speak for about 30 to 60 seconds, then you let the other person speak, and then they'll speak for 30, 60 seconds, and then they'll speak again. Now, the idea is that where permission comes into that is that you can start to sense whether you're going to speak a little longer than that, right? Yeah, you can. So, for example, like John, if you asked me a big meaty question, I might say, it could take a good 5 minutes, to get through a decent answer to that question, if you don't mind me taking that long. And that little bit of permission can really help people focus, as well as demonstrate that you're being polite. Because the reality is, people have the memory span of a goldfish more often than not. They're interested for about 3 to 5 seconds, and then 30 seconds or so might be about as long as they can last listening to one person talk. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, it is polite from what you said, and it does also break down any barriers, I think. And as you were saying about how that table tennis analogy, I thought, yeah, wouldn't it be great if it usually was a half and half? But sometimes either people are passionate about what they're talking about, which is totally fine. Sometimes we're going to talk longer than others, but getting that permission and taking the other person or the other people into account is absolute gold. And I have heard about having a conversation. Life's a conversation. You're either having one with yourself or with someone else. So that's why these skills are so important, because it's integral into the fabric of life.
Yeah, and like in the example earlier when we were speaking, I didn't mean to get so meta, but sometimes you might be thinking, actually, there's a good story I'd like to tell, or there's actually a different topic I'd like to turn to, and it can be a good thing to use permission to say to someone like, do you mind if we actually change topic for a second? Or actually, you just reminded me of something. Do you mind if we just speak about that for a few minutes and come back to the original topic? And when you're asking for permission, that lets someone know, like, okay, you're not boring me. I just had an idea, and I will come back to what we're talking about before. But in the absence of doing so, you can come off as a bit scattered, or perhaps impolite, that you're allowing someone to focus on what they were wanting to talk about.
Gotcha. And I like you start the sentence with, do you mind? And then take it from there.
Yeah, exactly. Even for example, initiating a conversation, right? We're living in an era now where people see their phone ringing and think, gosh, don't know how to text? Like nobody calls anyone anymore, and so it can be a nice thing. Yeah, typically now people will just text and say, "Got 5 minutes," you know, and people read that sort of stuff and they scrunch up their face a bit and go, "Yeah, okay," you know, and then you're going to start a conversation on a not so optimal note. One thing that I'd learned is that it's not just polite to use permission to say, like, do you mind if we had a quick 5 minute chat? Because I'd like to discuss something with you. It's actually using a specific angle of, would now be a bad time to have a quick 5 minute chat about something. And the psychology of your approach in use of permission can be so empowering, because you're not just saying, like, would you mind if we had a 5 minute chat, or would now be a good time? Because when you ask someone, would now be a good time, people tend to just lie and say, yeah, all right, because they don't want to be the bad guy that goes, actually, it's not a good time. So how about later? But if you ask someone, would now be a bad time to have a quick 5 minute chat? I mean, if I asked you that question, what would be your reaction?
Yeah, I would be receptive to that, because you are asking permission, and it does leave it open for me to be honest about it as well and say, actually, mate, I've got to go and take a dump. So, no. I probably cut that bit out. The line came to me and I had to say it, mate. I would say it gives me the permission to be honest and truthful and say, look, actually, now's not a good time. There's a couple of things I need to do. But then once I've done that, I'll be in a better mindset to be able to have a chat with you about what you want to have a chat about. So you get both opportunities. You get to go, yeah, let's get it sorted now, or you get to say what you need before you can have that meaningful conversation.
Yeah. And imagine the inverse scenario. Like, it's perfectly fine, you're available right now. And I say to John, would now be a bad time to have a quick 5 minute chat about something I wanted to discuss? And you've got the time. What's your mentality when someone takes that particular approach with you to ask that sort of question?
We just feel honoured, and is honoured the word, or respected, or you're taking me into consideration, and that feels good. I did notice that you do say would now be a bad time, so you don't say would now be a good time. It's almost the assumption in the question that it's probably not going to be a good time, and maybe that's, I don't know if there's any psychology involved in that, but I did notice that.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, this isn't about like Jedi mind tricks. It's just it's interesting to honestly hear what people's feedback would be to if they were asked that question. Now, for me personally, if someone said to me, would now be a bad time to have a quick 5 minute chat, the first thing I would think of is, you thought of me.
Yes.
Like, because you have no idea whether it's a bad time or not to interrupt someone. But it might be. You don't know. And so before interrupting them, you're asking them, would that be a disturbance to you? And if you're taking the consideration to ask that before anything else, then that's really putting you in the best possible position to have a conversation for greatness. Because I can tell you, when I've said that to a few people, their answer has been, not at all. By all means, give me a call. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you again. And then they're beaming when they're on the phone with me, And so that's the cool part about it all, is the fact that you have that little bit of consideration, empowered with permission. You're starting a conversation the best possible way you can.
Consideration empowered with permission. Oh, that's going to be, quote, Aaron Holesgrove for promo for this episode, mate. I love that. I love that. Simple and powerful. That's the thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be complicated. It's very simple to change a few words when you want to have a conversation with someone. And as you say, it sets that foundation to have a great conversation. And then in your experience, when you do that, like how you said, it's not about Jedi mind tricks, and I get that. It's also interesting that there may be some psychology behind it. We're not going down that road, because when you behave and ask that way, your experience is that people show up to the conversation enthusiastic, ready, willing, and able, and that's the idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
right? And it feels like such a simple thing, such a
Mm.
little thing. But
Mm.
then you imagine start using that. You imagine start taking that approach to people that you know, people that you don't know, and
Mm.
start to imagine the kind of conversations you'd be having just by showing a bit of consideration before you start diving into something.
Yeah.
Like, even if it makes a 1% difference, it's better. And in my experience, it always adds like an improvement to the quality of the conversation, or the quality of the conversation that you'd be wanting to have that you otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah, that's gold. And we're dealing with people all the time. And no matter where you are, what you're doing as a listener, you're dealing with people all the time, whether it's family, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's your work colleagues.
Yeah.
That's how we go through life, interacting with human beings. And to be able to do that better does increase the quality of your life. So that's really going to help me. We've got a weekend coming up, and I'm going to make sure that I use that and practice that on the weekend. And I would encourage you, as a listener listening to us talk now, have a chat, use that next time as soon as you can, and let us know, how did it go? Did it elevate the conversation? How did you feel? How did they feel? Did they feel respected? The conversation that you did have, how did it go? So I'd be really, really interested to know. Aaron.
Yeah, I'd be interested to check in too,
Yeah,
see how you go with it.
yeah, definitely.
I actually have a great story in relation to this that I'd love to share with you, John, if you're happy to have a listen. You see, you know that I'm doing it because it's automatic to me now. It's muscle memory. But
Yeah,
I'm also sincere.
yeah, no, definitely. I get that, and you're a good friend, so I know you're all on the level. It's all fantastic. So, but I just couldn't help myself. Yes, I would absolutely love you to share a story of
Yeah.
that, Aaron.
All right, because I think this is a good example of putting into practice, right? And this is about a mutual friend of ours, John, Mr. Juan Martin.
Right.
Yeah, it was when he interviewed me. And this is for a job where it was 4 interviews to get the job. And this is interview number 4. And I was warned he's a tough interview, right? Because he doesn't have time for people who waffle, people who don't answer questions very well. He likes straight, direct to the point, and he likes respecting personal boundaries in conversations, right? So don't talk his ear off for 5 to 10 minutes on one topic. He likes balance in a conversation. And this is also exceptionally fair. I'm not looking to set up the story as the guy is a tough conversation. He's actually one of the loveliest guys I've ever spoken to. Yeah, I was definitely warned in advance. Yeah, be on your best behavior. Yeah, like obviously show your professionalism
Mm,
in how you speak. Right
mm.
now, in this interview, which went for I'm going to say about 1.5 hours,
Yep.
there were 3 different times where I attempted to use permission in the conversation. And it was because you can imagine he's asked me a question. Like, I remember the first question was something like, what would you do in a challenging situation where a client gets really upset? Right. And I gave my answer in terms of, in theory, this is the mindset that I would have, yada, yada, yada. Right. That was my answer. And I
Mm,
said, I can actually think of a really good situation where I was put in that situation if you'd like to hear about it.
mm.
And he said, no, 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 that's okay. I was happy with your answer. Thank you. Right. And this happens the first 2 times.
Yep.
And it's interesting to take a 30-second time out here, right? Because the thing is that when you rock it off with your random ideas and random things that come into minds that you think would be really interesting to say, that doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be interesting for the other person to hear.
Right.
And this is where permission is empowering you, where you get to check in first and sort of propose what you'd say next, and then there you're going to get feedback in real time whether someone actually wants to hear that or not,
I
right?
gotcha. So you could have just launched straight into that situation where you were in that position,
Yeah.
and that's not what he wants to hear. So you check in with him beforehand and ask permission, and he's like, "Yeah, no, we're all good."
Keep in mind my job title that I was interviewing for was engagement manager, right?
Yep.
A person who talks to people for a living.
Yep.
So if I was doing that, I was going to look like someone who isn't worth hiring. And I wasn't doing this deliberately or anything like that. It's just I'm being myself,
Mm, mm.
But I can honestly say I thought that those examples that I thought of in the moment would be really interesting to him.
Yeah.
Where you go like, wow, that was a tough situation. I'm impressed that you got yourself out of it that way with that mindset. I didn't get to tell him because the reality is that that wasn't interesting to him. He didn't want to know that, right? And that's okay. Just because you think it's interesting doesn't mean the other person's going to think it's interesting, which I thought was interesting in and of itself. Through permission, I was learning from him how he would like to be comfortable in that conversation, whether he wanted to stay high level, where he was interested to get low level or whatnot. Anyway, the first two times he did that. The second time particularly, I remember I had a really great example, and I did it again. Like I gave a general answer in terms of how I would imagine to approach that sort of a situation or deal with those sorts of responsibilities. And I have a great example for you if you're interested in relation to that topic. He's like, no, that's okay, thank you. I was happy with your answer. But then the third time I did this in the interview, and it was actually right towards the end, he went and threw the question at me, what kind of books are you reading at the moment? What kind of books do you like to read? Actually, that was the question. What kind of books do you like to read? And I said to him, well, it's interesting that you asked me that. So first of all, it's always audiobooks for me. I never read physical books, right? Because I'm on the go doing things and I get to multitask. I
Mate, you've
used
got
to be
8 kids. We get it.
yeah, exactly. I used to be into Star Wars books before Disney bought Star Wars. All the Legends books were really fascinating to me. I used to play them in the car and stuff. But since Disney has bought Star Wars, I don't like how they replaced that whole storyline and made it not canon anymore. So I stopped listening to those, and now I've moved on to self-improvement books. In fact, I'd love to tell you about the current book that I'm listening to that I've almost finished if you're interested. And this time he went, yeah, tell me. I want to know everything. I want to know everything about this book that you're listening to, what it is, why you like it. Go, talk for ages, right? And what I found out about the guy through permission is that books are something that he's really interested in, And so just with a bit of permission, I got to check in whether that's something he wanted to deep dive into. And it turns out he does. And then I'm finding out that he's a really interesting guy through using permission because I like people who read books. That's just something about me. I'm actually not a big book reader myself. So I like talking to people who listen to audiobooks or read books because they're full of useful information. So I'm always happy to encourage those conversations. And as a delicious piece of irony, John, the book that I talked to him about was Quiet Leadership by Dr. David Rock, which we discussed the last time I was on this show. The guy who invented the scarf model.
What a great callback. I love it.
Yeah, and then he's just going, wow, I know that book. I haven't read it, but I know of it.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated. And we ended up talking for way longer than we were supposed to. And then I'm walking out of that job interview just beaming with excitement. I really bonded with this guy. It was all through the use of permission. Obviously, the job experience helped too. But
well, it's interesting in that environment because when you're preparing for a job interview, you're always thinking, or we've been coached to say, what's the situation, what's the task, what's the action, and what's the result. So you pretty much got to have a story to back up. Tell us about a time when. And it can't be always theory. You've got to say, when this happened to me, this is what happened. So interesting that what I'm also hearing is that you get to kind of calibrate the conversation as you go.
Yeah.
And it's almost like checking in a bit. It's like, okay, I want to go this way. And you get permission whether that's wanted or not, and you're happy to go either way. And then until, in this case, you found out the thing that really interested him the most. And that would also massively help in building rapport as well, because you got to the point where you obviously answered all his questions and he could see your work experience. And then you got to like each other because you had something in common that you were both interested in and learning that through permissions, through getting the permission throughout the conversation.
Exactly. Like, say for example, like I remember last time I was on the show, I was talking about how my 3 favorite things are music, basketball, and computers. Yeah, I could just throw into a random conversation like, Yeah, I really love basketball. Yeah, John, I'd love to tell you about what's happening in the NBA playoffs right now because I think they're fascinating. Would you like to hear a little bit about it? Now, you might sort of go like, no, that's okay. I'm not really a sports guy." But I gave permission. I asked for permission. Sorry,
Mm,
I didn't just assume that I had permission.
mm,
Yeah,
mm.
because I don't know if you're a sports guy. I know you live in Melbourne, so I assume you're an AFL guy because that's how daft I can be sometimes. But hell, I don't know. um,
No,
AFL's kind of like basketball, isn't it?
I love basketball. I used to play. I shoot hoops all the time with my son, and I keep an eye on what's going on. When you actually said that last time, I thought, oh, that's interesting because I've got the IT background. I like basketball, and I also love music. So, we've got we've got some common interests there
Ooh,
because you said I don't meet a lot of people that have those three. And at the time, I didn't jump in, but I thought, well, that's me too, mate. So it's no,
there
no
you
wonder we
go.
get on really well. And the other thing about that story about the one job interview is that you got the job,
Mm,
and that's how we met because we ended up working at the same company together
yeah,
and clicked straight away. I remember the first time I met you, there was it was the function and the time of year we all get together and plan. And so I came up to
yeah.
the head office and we got together and had a bonding session and a get together with the engagement managers. It was a few days I'll never forget. But I remember you walking into the room and I thought, this guy's got confidence. He's got charisma, or as the kids say now, Riz. But apparently that's not just charisma; it means something else as well. I don't know. So
Mm, not familiar with that
charisma,
one.
he's got the Riz. And he's obviously getting the job done because I know at that time you were saying how this project was going really well. It was going towards the end of the project, but everyone was really happy with the outcomes. So those first impressions, it's true what they say. We're human beings and we see something and we tend to judge it or assess it straight away. That's what we have to do. I guess it's primal, right? Because you've got to know. Going back to what we were talking about last time, is it
Yeah.
a threat or is it a friendly? But the first time I met you was definitely, this guy's a friendly, and I need to get to know this guy a lot better. So I'm so rapt that we've stayed mates, even though we've both moved on, and we're having this conversation for greatness. Wow, so there's so much to be gained from permissions.
Yeah, it's just a underappreciated quality that you can show someone. It takes such little effort, just a tiny shred of consideration, and
Mm.
all of a sudden you're having fun, yeah, having enthusiastic conversations because of it.
I'd imagine this helps in romantic relationships as well.
It happens, yeah, all relationships. This isn't just a work thing, this is a
Mm.
personal thing as well.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, do you mind if we spend an hour tonight, turn the TV off so we can have a really serious chat? You know, yeah, do you mind if you take that off the bed because it's really annoying me? you know, uh, hey,
No, but there's 25 cushions on the bed, mate. They have to stay there.
how did you know?
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to part one of our enlightening conversation with Aaron Holesgrove. We've delved deep into the permission model, setting the stage for transformative conversations. But hold on, the journey doesn't end here. In part two, we take a deep dive into practical applications and real-world examples that bring the permission model into life. You'll discover how asking the right questions with the right context can unlock doors that you never knew existed. Plus, Aaron shares some intriguing insights that you won't want to miss. Stay tuned for more actionable wisdom and engaging dialogue in part two. I appreciate you. Thanks for listening. You're an amazing individual. Stay awesome.